And at this time, I would like to welcome back to the stage Tara Hassan, who is going to be the moderator for our final panel of the day before a night of receptions begins. So, Tara, please join me in welcoming her. Thank you very much.
All right, I have the duty of holding everyone up for the drinks, so we'll try to get through this efficiently. You guys can all join me up here, the panelists. Thanks for having me up here again. It's an important topic that I think has been woven into the discussion at various points today, but good to have some dedicated time to talk on ESG. And for those of you that are maybe new to the term, and we love an acronym in mining, it's environmental, social, and governance. And this has evolved over time. I think ESG has always been critical, different names, and it's taken different forms. And we've seen it change a lot over time. So excited to have a really great group of panelists up here who have a mix of time and experience in the Yukon. All instead of me giving a version of their bios, I'm just going to allow people to kind of go down the line and introduce themselves and give a bit of a description of why the Yukon's important to them.
All right. Yeah, my name is Scott Berdahl. I'm a Yukon. Is this not on? Hello?
Yeah,
Okay. I'm a Yukon-based prospector and geologist. I co-founded Snowline Gold a few years ago. The Yukon's important to me because I was born and raised here, raising my family here. It's home.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Lauren Haney. I am VP with Fireweed Metals, VP of Indigenous Relations and Sustainability. I am also from the Yukon, grew up here, and now raising a family here. I have been in mineral development, exploration, and mining on the permitting and Indigenous relations side for 20 years now. I am new to leadership in industry on this side of things, but not new to this world. Certainly, my most recent position was as Deputy Minister with Energy, Mines and Resources. Prior to that, the chair of the Yukon Environmental and Socioeconomic Assessment Board. So I certainly am aware of ESG trends and where things sit leading edge in the Yukon today. I'll say for this particular panel, I'm usually not on the front line of investors and answering those questions, but as a regulator, I would get a lot of investors doing due diligence and asking questions, so I can bring some of that perspective as well. Very pleased to be here.
Is this on? Sandeep Singh, I'm the CEO of Western Copper and Gold. We've got the Casino Copper Gold project, which many of you probably know of, starting our way through the environmental assessment process. I joined just over a year and a half ago, picking up on a lot of hard work that's been done on this project for years, if not decades, and looking to help push it forward through this next really important phase. Throughout all the phases, I guess we're on now, throughout all the phases of this project, I think we've, as a company, conducted ourselves well, been collaborative, consulted, and genuinely tried to make the project better, more sustainable, more palpable to the people that it affects, which is everyone. So happy to be on the panel with you.
Awesome, thanks. Maybe I'll start with you, Lauren, and given your different perspectives and seats on both sides, how have you seen the priorities of stakeholders in the Yukon shift during your time, and as ESG has sort of evolved as a more formalized concept?
I'd say overall it's gone from superficial and pretty transactional to much more deeply rooted and integrated. It's interesting though, and I'm very curious to hear the experiences of you both. But from the investor perspective, the questions that we generally get, there are certainly examples of very sophisticated and well-informed investors and certainly analysts. But for the most part, I don't hear a lot of that. I hear more still at that rather superficial level. And I actually see that as a little bit of a barrier to progressing ESG, to evolving it, because we will meet the expectations of investors. So I'm curious to see where this ends up going. I would say ESG is evolving, but I'm curious to watch investors generally catch up, I would say, and start to really drive it as well. So overall, I'd say where we're getting to now with ESG is very much embedded in the fabric of the work that we do. So it used to be sort of what's on your website, and now it's what does your governance structure look like? What do your KPIs look like? Do you have those elements of compliance with permits, compliance with agreements with First Nations as well? Is that all truly integrated across the company and down the lines?
Yeah, and it's an interesting element that it has started earlier in the cycle, so I'd be interested to hear your perspective, Scott, as you know, you're sort of the most junior stage up here. How have you embedded it early in the project life cycle? And when we go back to the comments this morning about time and the importance of time, how important do you think it is to embed it early to sort of streamline the process?
Yeah, I think it's crucial, and I think I had a good perspective in terms of being in the Yukon through the past gold rush and the kind of bear market interim, bringing us to now, and seeing a lot of the challenges that various projects and various companies faced, and just the changing winds and tides, and so with that in mind, and also just genuinely wanting to build a good company. When we launched Snowline, even before launching Snowline and looking for ways to do it, we were talking to local businesses. We were really trying to put our best foot forward. And our first year in 2021, we were doing botanical inventories of our exploration sites, of the site where we would build our camp, that kind of a thing. And so already kind of looking at that early exploration stage towards what does reclamation of this site look like. And if we have this survey done before we've even done a drill hole, we have a pretty good picture of what it looked like. So, trying to get in front of that, and it's not always a huge commitment. Like there are resources that kind of initiative takes, but in the long run, I think it can really pay off in terms of helping you out on that timeline. Because we've come a long way in those. It's been close to 5 years now, and we have a long way to go. But the foundation that we've set by starting out on that foot, I think, has gotten us to a place where we're not now just starting to think about all these things. We've already been thinking about them, throughout the organization for years, and so we're in a pretty good spot as we put more emphasis on that, and we really try to build things the right way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's an interesting point, because I think when ESG first came on the scene and investors were, pressing for all this, maybe to your point, superficial reporting, it probably wasn't as embedded throughout the organization, and it would be interesting to hear all of your perspectives on how you've gotten buy-in from your teams on the ground to understand ESG, or if that's something that still needs sort of evolution and time and investment to get that understanding throughout the organizations. Maybe start with you, Sandeep.
Sure. I mean, there's a lot there. I think evolving, you said the winds, or I can't remember the terminology used, it's still changing quite a bit. I mean, I actually think the mining sector, our industry's done a really good job on ESG for a lot longer than people give it credit for. It used to be called different things, whether it was CSR or just good businesses. You don't get to start a mine, you don't get to keep a mine unless you're doing those things properly. So we've been on the cutting edge of that, I think, for a lot longer. Investors caught up, and ESG was the buzzword that they all kind of latched onto, and it was erratic. At first, it was a lot of kind of greenwashing and ticking boxes, asking for things that didn't really make sense of every different company, and it is more bespoke. You have to tailor it to what you're actually doing responsibly. So I think the pendulum's kind of swung back to a better place now, where it's more genuine conversations. If you think they're superficial now, like, go back 2 years, Lauren. So I think we're in a better place where it's a more honest conversation. So that's a good thing, and then that'll continue to evolve because it's really important. And so you have to start somewhere, and it's normal for that start to be a little bit erratic, to keep using the same word. So happy with the direction it's going. I think in terms of how deeply it's embedded, I think it's everywhere, and it ought to be. I kind of liken it to health and safety, where for a while, early, in my career, it was kind of a bespoke thing that people would talk about, and now it's the start of every presentation, and it's every CEO talking about it, and it's worked its way into every level of the organization, and I think that's what's happening or needs to happen with ESG as well. I mean, again, you can vary on the wording and the terminology and the depths of what everything matters. Governance, the G, has been in place for longer. Investors understood the G side of things a lot earlier. The E and the S is a work in progress.
I would say this is where governance and values really, really matter. It really does start at the core, at the top, and at the heart there. It's one of the things that attracted me to Fireweed Metals was the strong core values that I could see immediately in everyone I talked to, and as demonstrated in the work they do. From a governance perspective, you do have to be very deliberate, so intentional in looking at KPIs, for example, because at some point, especially when you're in exploration, you've got folks in an organization who are driven by drilling results, meters drilled, et cetera. And sometimes those objectives can be not necessarily at odds with ESG objectives, but you have to build those right into that same person, that same unit doing the work. So that pull and the challenge of making informed decisions exists within the same role. Everyone must be thinking about ESG as well.
Yeah, I think that, just in complementing both of those answers, that culture within an organization is crucial. And, it's not so much how do you get people to buy in. I've found that by setting this culture and having a lot of people really help to set this culture within the organization, that we've attracted a lot of talented people who want to work with Snowline, because of those, putting those principles forward and working on that front. So, I think that it can be beneficial not only on the timeline sense, but in terms of building a team that is excited to work. And it was noted on an earlier panel, just with where we're getting in the cycle and the sort of underinvestment or just under creation of people coming to the industry, there's going to be a lot of competition for people. And so if you can show that you're a company that's doing things in a way that people want to be a part of, I think that sets you ahead, regardless of what investors think of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, those are all great points. And, Sandeep, I think you touched on sort of the investor element of it. Often sort of their perspectives can maybe be misaligned. They maybe not have all had the experience of working within a corporation and understanding sort of why your priorities are where they are, and maybe refer back to or have expectations that you should be further along at a certain stage. So how do you sort of manage those expectations of investors when you're having these discussions so that they understand, why you're focusing on the things you are and what the timelines are as a result of that?
Yeah, it's a good point. I think what Scott said is accurate. It's you got to build your culture and set your own path for what you're doing as a company, and not necessarily get too dissuaded by what people are asking of you at any particular point in time. Right? You kind of have to have a North Star that matters to you, and then head for it, because it does change, and there will be certain things that matter really deeply to one investor and not at all to another, and so you have to kind of set your own direction a little bit, bearing in mind everything that people are asking you for, and a lot of it is fair, sometimes it isn't. So I think that would be my first answer is you're doing it for yourselves because you're building a good business. Yes, you want to attract investors and you want to say things that matter to them and hopefully lead them to invest in you, but I don't think you can be chasing, specific tidbits that are going to work for one investor versus another. I think you have to have a guiding principle and then stick to it, and then and then communicate it and find. Someone said this earlier today, but you find the investors that resonate with what you're saying, and I don't think you change what you're saying to find investors.
Yeah, it would be a lot of tail chasing, I think, if that's what you're doing. I think, both you and Scott have been doing some marketing globally. Are you seeing sort of a geographic shift at all between, Australia caring more about ESG or Europe or Canada, or is it sort of a topical conversation everywhere you're out marketing these days?
Yeah, I haven't thought of it that way. I can't, off the top of my head, feel a geographical difference. I mean, safe to say, maybe with the exception of it, it definitely swung hard in Europe in particular, and maybe still is, quite deeply rooted. But it is everywhere. So I think that gap, maybe Europe got there earlier, but everybody else caught up. Is my knee-jerk reaction.
Yeah, Europe's the only place so far where I've, after a meeting, being handed a form, fill this out and we'll see if you're investable kind of a thing. So.
Yeah, they definitely got there faster for sure. But it has been interesting to see, to your point earlier, Sandeep, that kind of correction back, and some of these big funds that were pushing the ESG mandate have, been a bit more quiet about that, as we've, as investment dollars have been maybe harder to come by. And that's, I think maybe where the danger of appealing to the investor whim entirely is, shifting your vision and your values too much, and they're moving around quicker than you can shift those things. How do you think the shift in disclosure expectations, how are you managing that amongst your teams and balancing that against the important work of advancing the project itself as well? Maybe you can start, Scott.
Sure. I mean, I think they go hand in hand. Just being, well, first of all, like there's not much in terms of disclosure that's going to tie us up right now. It's still not like we're, I guess the direction it's headed, things could get more complicated, but right now it's still fairly straightforward. So I feel like in terms of just moving the project ahead, ensuring we have clear lines of communication with government, with First Nations, with other interested parties, that's key, and I think that's just something we would fundamentally want to do regardless.
Do you have any thoughts on that, Lauren?
I think it's interesting watching what's happening with very public disclosure and transparency on that level, and I think that's something it's difficult for small exploration companies, especially that it's a lot of work behind that, and it feels very risky as well, being very open and transparent with what's happening, because things aren't always perfect and mistakes do happen. But what I do think is I haven't seen very open, transparent sharing of information. I haven't seen that turn on someone. I think it's something you can fall back on to say this is a part of us being open and transparent to the extent we possibly can be, and even some mistakes are out there along with the learnings from them.
Yeah, I didn't know what I was going to say to that question until I listened to your answer. I think it's absolutely right. I mean, look, it's part and parcel. You doing the work. You should be out there talking about it openly. Yes, does it create a little bit more burden? Everyone's got a lot of stuff on their desk to do. One more thing, but it's a thing that's worth doing. But yeah, when you said it, it reminded me, like, there's always that push and pull of, am I going to get criticized for this? Am I saying too much? Am I saying too little? Like, but I think we just put out 23,000 pages of disclosure, if you will. So we're oversharing, and it's a good thing. But I just remember conversations with even junior companies when I was on the advisory side, for instance. You just got to start somewhere, right? Like, it's just such a big thing if you look at it in totality, and it's also not finite. It's like there's no end to it. You know, so you know the biggest risk you can find is you know, not sharing or not being open or feeling like you want to hold back because it's not good enough. It might not be perceived as good enough. But I think you just have to start somewhere, and you just have to set you know, realistic goals and then work towards achieving them. You know, on the flip side, having this massive aspiration that you then can't maintain, or you know, that's a bit of a whipsaw for everybody, not just investors, but anybody that's involved in your project or cares about it or is affected by it. So I think it's you know just be real and genuine, which you know is kind of good practice for everything.
I just wanted to add as well that there's so much accountability in it too, which I think is an important piece. When you put something out to the public, even when times internally get difficult and there's push and pull inside the organization, having that information out there is, like you said, the North Star. Like that holds you accountable, and other parties can hold you accountable. I think that's an important piece as well.
Mm-hmm. And I think it draws back to Scott's point, and I think the comment Stacey made earlier in her panel discussion is, I think the younger generation is also identifying with having vision and values, and what are we working towards, maybe in a different way than older generations were. So it's nice to kind of have that forced, maybe if that's what you want to call it, need to disclose it and keep people motivated to move towards those goals. Switching gears a bit, there's been lots of conversation this morning and this afternoon around, collaboration. I think if you had to sort of capitalize or state sort of what does your picture perfect successful collaboration with First Nations and local communities look like how would you like that process to go? If you've obviously had a lot of experience on both sides, Lauren, if you can maybe touch on what that looks like for you.
Sure. A term that's coming up a lot is reciprocity, and I think what it looks like is reciprocity manifested. And so it's a term, it's a word, but it's an idea and a way of being and interacting that comes from Indigenous culture. And it's becoming a bit of a buzzword, but it's only because Indigenous people have decided to share this idea. So it is about the two-way flow of respect and responsibility, accountability, even benefits. And I should caveat that too by saying every First Nation defines reciprocity in a different way. But that's generally the idea. And I think that the demonstration of that in a relationship is it's the simple things. It's when something doesn't go quite right or not as expected, somebody picks up the phone and calls the other party versus writing a letter and escalating it. So it's that day-to-day, a reliance on the strength of a relationship and the foundation to withstand the ups and downs, because there will be ups and downs and a lot of hard conversations. But I love that idea and that principle of reciprocity and balance. I think the power balance is also a very important factor that we often forget. We walk into a room and just sort of take for granted that, all right, we have this position and these interests and you have yours, but really being clear and open and trying to set that power often imbalance and structure that is a very important way to start.
That's great. Thinking about the early relationship building, and we touched a little bit on this, Scott, but when you think about relationship building, early capacity investments, how do you think that can translate into permitting efficiency as you go through your process? You've just come out with a PEA and you're moving along that development pipeline.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it dovetails with what Lauren just said and some of the earlier comments, but just, you're building that trust. And just by having transparency, having open communication, if you know who each other are on the opposite sides of the table, then it just makes it so much easier to talk, to work through issues. Because again, there are always issues. There are always points of contention or things that don't go exactly as planned. And so just having the lines of communication, keeping those open, and being able to have mutually respectful dialogue, that is huge. And so if you can start early as opposed to going in and kind of only putting your hand up when you're, oh, hey, I'm Scott and I want to build a mine, that's a tough place to start from. So if you can lay that groundwork, then you're not set, but you're better set than otherwise.
Did you? Oh, okay.
Sure.
You look like you were raising your. Yeah.
You asked about
Yeah.
capacity funding?
Yeah, just like investing in
Yeah, look, it's a necessity. I mean, I think to have true consultation and true involvement, and there is a need for capacity funding. We've been doing that. I'm sure everyone's doing that, and it leads to good results. I mean, I think it's the only way to have real buy-in ultimately, is to be able to share and have that information be absorbed, and have good technical people on the other side advising the affected First Nations that we're trying to get comfort on our projects. For us, that's all we've been living for the last several years, and I think it's leading to good results. I think back to before my time, the BAT study, the best available tailings technology study that we did on our tailings dam. That was a very involved process with our affected First Nations, the government, their advisors. It led to a good outcome and more trust in what we were putting forward in our project. For the last year and a half, that I've been, a bit longer, but last year and a half leading up to our submission, the back and forth with our affected First Nations and their advisors, in some cases, not all, but in some cases was tremendous. Others we'll catch up with on the other side, but we feel like we've done a lot of that work, and it made the project better. I mean, there's really good people on the other side. It's not even the other side of the table, around the circular table, I guess. But there was really good exchange, and it was made possible by that capacity funding, and it made the project better for everybody, including ultimate investors. So I think it's a necessity. We realize that. I think the sector's done a good job. I think Yukon companies have done a good job doing their part in filling that gap, and I think it serves everyone.
That's great. When we again, I guess this topic of time has been very on point today, but aligning, Pierre was talking about the need to move quickly and capture this moment for the Yukon. How do you think you can align everyone to your point around the table on similar timelines while still providing comfort that the right work is being done, that all the pieces are in place and you're thinking about the right things, and also for exploration, when you're starting early, you don't necessarily know the true scale of what it is you're building. So how do you sort of manage that expectation along the way to do this in an efficient way?
I think again, transparency and just having that dialogue is key, and capacity plays into that in a big way. But even when you're at the early stage, and you might not be a company that really can put capacity funding on the table, say, as you're especially early stage exploration. It's important to be working on that relationship, putting the energy into that relationship nonetheless, because capacity is limited. And so, when you approach a First Nation and they have 20 or 30 other companies that are also approaching them at a similar stage, why would they give their time to you as opposed to all of these other companies that are, they're not the big groups that are, have these long-standing projects and these agreements. You're just popping out of the woodwork. And so, all that you can do to drive those conversations, to build that relationship goes a long way.
Look, I think it's just honest conversation. I mean, we don't always have all the answers when sometimes they're expected of us. I mean, this is a fluid thing. Even the environmental assessment process that we're now starting, My team says this all the time. I mean, it's a process that's meant to make the project better. You lived it, and we're living in an age now where you're kind of expected to have all the answers on day one. But that's sometimes the external view. But when we have our conversations with the nations that are affected by it, they get it. Like if you have an honest conversation with it, they know there are still pieces that need to kind of come together, and they come through that piece of assessment and then licensing. So I think if you just treat people honestly, and we don't have the answer, you say, look, we have this form of the answer, and more detail will follow. They get it, they know, and more times than not, I think they give us the sector that benefit of the doubt, more so than I think the general public does.
I think there's something to be said about setting the foundation. So I think ultimately we're all in this because exploration and mining should contribute positively to the development of a local community, of the region. So it's also about that foundation and preparation, and this is where, in my mind, the territorial government comes in as well. Many things need to happen at once to allow mining and exploration to be able to benefit a community. So right now in many communities, they're struggling with things that have nothing to do with mining. You're asking them to think about this thing over here and what could the future look like, and they're struggling with real day-to-day deep and serious issues. So working together with the territorial government to talk about very specifically to a community, to a First Nation, what is it they need, and how can we work together to give nations and communities what they need to set them up to be able to benefit better from mining, and exploration. So there's certainly what each company does, but we also have to work with the government and together as well when we're in overlapping traditional territories and communities to lay that foundation to make it possible for communities to benefit.
That's great. Thanks, Lauren. It might be interesting for you, having sat on the government side and now moved over to the corporate side. Was there anything, sort of a commonality while you were in that seat that was like a pain point that if you had a wish list of things that companies could do different or bring differently to the government, that you think it would be helpful for others to understand?
You sure you want to
those?
open those?
Yeah, I know this might be a loaded one.
That is a good question that I was not expecting. I would say I understand that each company has to be in it for ourselves, but more collaboration would be within industry, I think would be really, really helpful. Coming with clear asks that don't just benefit your company, but you've really sat down with everybody and thought strategically and said, okay, I want X, I want Y, but you know what? B and C would help facilitate that, and it's actually better broadly for this community or for development in this region specifically. So I'd say more collaboration on the industry side would be very helpful. I think also just the expectation that government will do this for me or should do this for me. I think there's maybe they should be, maybe they shouldn't be, but B, it's be clear about what your expectations are. If you're expecting the government to do something, just say it, rather than expecting it's not done and complaining about it on the back end. So I think it's about a lot more open communication, just laying it out there.
Seems to be a common theme that we might struggle with. I don't know if it's just mining or society on the open communication front, but certainly a good takeaway for people here. Michael had some numbers this morning on investment in the Yukon that Ira mentioned as well. So, you know, if we think about the Yukon becoming a globally recognized mining jurisdiction, and I'd argue with that amount of money being raised, we're there already. But you know, when you think about, and Sandeep, in your banking days, you know, you were involved in, you know, not only Canada but North America and other jurisdictions. So, you know, do you think there's elements that are missing to be able to crack that code for investors?
Yeah, I am a recovering
Yes.
banker. It's a good question. I mean, look, to your point, that's an awful lot of capital raised for a small sector. So I think that's, you know, there's been some successes, and successes breed that capital inflow. I mean, certainly there are challenges in the Yukon and in Canada and everywhere from a mining perspective, but I think it's a win, and Scott here has been leading the charge from that perspective. I think we've seen good things happening in the Yukon with the entry of the Lundin Group into Fireweed. That's a lot of horsepower. Today we had, you know, one of the architects of the mining industry in Pierre Lassonde here and stepping in. So I think we've seen positivity, a lot of people in the room drilling and finding real things that matter on the global scale. So I think from that perspective, it's there. You know, I think we need more successes from a mining perspective as opposed to purely from an exploration perspective. Right now, just Hecla kind of carrying the flag from a mining perspective, and so I think that will come with time. I certainly hope so, and I believe so. I think there's good projects here to be built, and it's always the balance of finding the right project, the right miner, the right financing. There are risks, and you gotta mitigate them. And so I think that's one thing that's needed. If we're being honest, we need some successes there, and so hopefully those will come. And then, you know, what stops it from really reaching its full potential? We've talked about it probably ad nauseum today, but it's infrastructure. It's the remoteness of it, and that too has taken some pretty major leaps forward, even in the year and a half that I've been in the Yukon. So I think it's coming. I think the Yukon has the potential to have the next 30 years that BC or Ontario or Quebec have had for the last 30 years, and the only gating item has been infrastructure. And if you look at the history of the Yukon, a lot of the infrastructure that's in place now stems from mining of the past, and so it's not all negative. There's some certainly positive legacies there too. So, yeah, I think it's a far cry from the geoscience we were having last year. Mm-hmm. So
yeah, that's a great point. Lauren and Scott, can you maybe touch on to Sandeep's point of moving just from exploration to being able to put things into production? How do you think the tripartite groups can best work together to demonstrate that there is a long-term commitment to responsible development?
I think just first I agree completely that we need to get there with actual. I guess I call it an actual success story of here's a producing operation. We need to see, but that tripartite is of just government, First Nations, and industry pushing together. I think that's been the concern when we go back to the investors and seeing things that that's the conversation that comes up again and again. Okay, it's a great project, but is it going to be built in 2030 or 2062? So. So we need to see that come together, and I think that the foundation is there. All parties are at the table here. That's really encouraging to see. But I think in terms of pushing that forward, we need a project that's kind of on the cusp. Even maybe it's Eagle. Maybe it's someone comes back, gets it online in a way that the First Nation of Nachinaik Dun is happy to see. I think that would be a huge win for the territory. Some of the recommendations that came out of that review board, implementing those, getting a more functioning regulatory policy that can work, that builds public trust, that builds trust amongst First Nations, and would help with that collaboration. So, I think we have a pretty stacked roster in terms of the territory and projects moving ahead, but we need to hit a few home runs. So.
I mean, I might just add, look, the streamlining part of it is important. I mean, it takes too long in not just the Yukon, the country, and honestly, globally, it takes too long to bring these projects that we need to bear. So there's everyone can do a little bit better there, and you know, it's good that the federal government is focusing on it, because to be honest, most of the delays have been at the federal government level, where you've got multiple departments overlapping, doing the same work, going back to square one. That certainly can be streamlined, but there are certain things that just have to be done and should be done right. And I actually personally believe that that tri-governmental Yukon Federal and First Nations, whilst it's a bit slower, anytime you add different streams into something, it invariably slows it down. But it's a really good system, and I think it's a good model. And it's a more meaningful step. That once you go through that step, it just matters more. You're not doing things sequentially, but you're doing it at once, and you're not going to the First Nations after the fact, and where it feels like it's it's been cooked up in a room that they weren't in. So you're bringing it to them as a done deal. I don't think that works for anybody. It just bogs things down. So I think it's a good system. Can it be more efficient? Everything in life can be more efficient. It's a sad state of affairs, and it's not a Yukon thing. It's a Canadian thing that right now investors feel like you can go into far, Peru's got a great mining history, Chile's got a great mining history, but right now, if you ask most investors, they'd probably put money into Argentina before they put money into Canada, and that shouldn't be the case. So I think we need to do some things to get ourselves back into a reasonable time frame.
I think it does come back to, in part, what I was speaking about before about laying the foundation. So on many fronts, preparedness of a community for development. So I think that's where the tripartite group and arrangement can be involved. But, Scott, you mentioned on the enforcement side of things, like implementation of a project and enforcement. Right now in the Yukon, focusing on that and having First Nations, industry, and government focusing on how to build a robust and reliable enforcement system so that we can give First Nations, as well as the general public, confidence that we can operate mines that will be operated safely and will be held to that standard, I think is critical. I think part of what stalls and generates endless information requests in the assessment and regulatory process is fear and uncertainty about, well, we're going to try to get all the information we possibly can right now because we don't trust that there will be the flexibility and adaptive management and the oversight on the back end to account for any unknowns. So if we can strengthen that back end, perhaps assessors and regulators and nations are willing to accept a little bit less certainty over here because they're confident that issues that arise will be dealt with on the other side.
Mm-hmm. Those are some great points. I think it would be helpful to maybe speak to examples that you've seen, and I guess we had one up here earlier today around the Selkirk partnership, but where have you, in your experience in the Yukon, seen some strong partnerships that have either accelerated development or reduced friction along the way as you've evolved your projects? Anyone can jump in.
Yeah, I mean, we're early stage, so I think just very happy with the partnerships that we've put into place, and I think that certainly helps when you walk into a room and you've worked with all kinds of companies that we like everyone up here, we put a strong emphasis on working with Yukon companies and Yukon contractors, and a huge majority of our contractor spend is also with First Nations owned or partnered businesses, and so at our stage that definitely goes a long way.
Yes, we need to learn more about the croissant business you have going up at Snowline from last night, but
it's a hard question because it's actually difficult to find a lot of examples, and I think that isn't anything to do with lack of trying or sophistication of the industry and individual companies. It's the nature of where exploration and mining is at in the Yukon right now, and there's a lot of distrust and there is a lot of fear. I would say, I mean, I worked for Alexco a long time ago, and that was an example at the time. So they had a benefits agreement with the First Nation. That was the First Nation of Nacho-Nayak-Dun. That was an example of things working in a reasonably collaborative and smooth way. That's not to say that benefits agreement was, fully adequate. It certainly wouldn't meet the test of standards today, but it was at the time enough to be a reflection of quite a strong relationship, and one that could do exactly what we were talking about, of withstanding the ups and downs and the hard conversations.
It's a bit tricky, I want to say, because I think there's a number of us, I'll include us in there, but a number of companies that have really good working relationships with their affected First Nations. The proof comes later, right? Like I think it's earning that relationship every day. It's easy to lose. It's a long time to build. So I think our company's done a good job of being consistent for an awfully long time, taking steps back when that was the right thing to do. The BAT study was an example of that. Now we're moving forward again, hugely collaborative. So you earn that, those little wins all the way along, and then ultimate success, comes later. So I think but I do see a lot of companies that seem to have the support of their affected First Nations, and but you don't have it. And you need to have it for forever, not for a moment in time. So it's a long-ended relationship, never-ending relationship.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. Are any of your groups seeing innovations, and whether that's technology you're using to track ESG performance, or with contracting, that you think are interesting to set new norms and to sort of help evolve ESG? Sure. Yeah. Go for it. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I mean, one thing, not to pump Snowline's tires too full or anything, but that have been really happy to see and blown away by, is just the way that our team has worked to kind of take advantage of, well, Starlink's one of the technologies, but really, our data structure. So Zoe, hopefully somewhere in here, maybe not, but she's done an amazing job, and others working around her have done an incredible job of organizing not just our geological data, but our environmental data, tracking our progressive reclamation as we explore, and just monitoring everything. And so, anyone on the management team, anyone on the board can just log in, look at this dashboard and see not just, where so-and-so took a rock sample earlier that day, but, what this stream reading was at any time of year, and that kind of a thing. And so, all that information is just right there, and yeah, it makes it a lot easier to kind of monitor how you're doing and how the project's coming along, and also to communicate.
Mm-hmm. That's really interesting. All right.
We're doing some interesting and innovative work around compliance and how to integrate permit requirements, as well as the requirements of agreements and commitments that the company has made, and find ways to make that easy to implement in the field. So kind of reframing SOPs from these long-winded written things that a lot of people don't read, to a much more instructional, picture-based, easy to access. You can access it on an app. Looking to make that a lot easier for folks to implement. We're also thinking about dashboards that from that transparency perspective of environmental performance, as well as local and Indigenous hires and contracting, and having that information available on a much more updated and publicly available basis.
Yeah, I think those are both really interesting initiatives, and like from a data and science perspective, I think our project has the most amount of data and science that's ever gone into a project in the Yukon. We've been collecting it for the last 2 decades. I think we're finding smarter ways to then synthesize it and share it. But one of the things I'm still probably most proud of is kind of on the low tech side. Like our team has been out holding open houses for the past year and a half, predates me, so probably longer, but certainly intensified as we've been working towards our ESG submission. And there's nothing that beats that actual exchange of ideas. You hear questions, some of them are fair, sometimes they're less fair, but you have to have that back and forth. And actually, it's the beauty of a territory like the Yukon. I've been new to it in the last year and a half. I feel like I met a big chunk of it. When you're meeting people, 40, 50 people at a time, you catch up. And our team has always been out there putting themselves front and center. At times when it was not popular, like the week or 2 weeks after, probably within the week of the Eagle failure, our team held an open house and fielded questions that maybe felt uncomfortable at the time. But I think that's kind of the human part of it that you can't. Nor should you. Again, we can get into the buzzwords and we can get into checklists and we can get into all the things people are asking of us. But I think just having real exchanges about our project with people that it affects is like central.
Mm-hmm. That's very.
And I just gotta say, you guys do an excellent job at that. I'm glad you raised it, and you deserve a lot of kudos for that.
Not me, but it's the team in the room.
Yeah,
I do a bit of it, but it's mostly them.
Important to, I think a lot of people do stakeholder mapping at the beginning, but to your point, that continued dialogue is so important along the way for the, coming back to the transparency, communication, and there's no computer program that can do that for you. As we sort of look into wrapping up here, I'll maybe start with Sandeep this time, so you're not forced to go first, Scott. But if you think about sort of what your 10-year vision is for responsible growth in the Yukon, and you could paint your dream scenario, I'm sure for you it's going to be having an operating mine, but you can maybe speak to that for the audience.
Yeah, look, I think it's a combination of things. Touched on it earlier. I forget us. I think 10 years from now, I want to see some mining success stories in the Yukon, things that people can be proud of. I'm certainly proud of our sector. I know everybody else is. Someone said it earlier. No one goes to work to try to do a bad job in our sector. No one I've met in 20 plus years. So yes, it's challenging, but everyone has the right ambitions. We certainly want to be through environmental assessment by then, and hopefully licensing and have a mine. And I think as we talked about earlier, seeing a project like ours, being an anchor tenant for the Grid Connect and bringing clean power to the Yukon, that's a pretty neat legacy to be a small part of if we can accomplish it. So I think even in the last couple of years, things have moved forward quite quickly. I think if we fast forward a couple more, I'm eager to see how that progresses. So yeah, just mining success, period. And obviously keen to see Casino move forward. I think it could be a part of bringing, and maybe I'll say this. I mean, I think we've seen it. Seen it with the Lundins. Snowline has attracted B2 Gold. We've attracted Rio Tinto and our friends at Mitsubishi Materials who are in the room. I think we need to continue to attract major mining companies to the Yukon, and I think we have the projects that can do it. Doesn't mean they have to own every asset, but I think we need to continue to build and attract people. Someone said it earlier. Money's it said it in the exploration context. Money flows to where it's the best risk reward. Well, we need the mining money to flow to the Yukon as well because it's a good risk reward.
So obviously, our 3 projects operating is what we want to see in 10 years. I would say I would like to see a few projects operating, certainly, and what I would love to see is the nearby communities and First Nations generally feeling like mining is contributing to their communities and for them to be able to say, you know what, our whatever outcomes or visions they have of what they want in different realms of health and happiness and wellness and whatever else it is that they want, that they can say either we're achieving some of those goals or we're on the path to some of those goals. I would also love to see youth in this territory understand something about exploration and mining. I think Family Day was amazing here. I think part of what we need to do to increase the profile of mining and exploration in the territory and get the whole territory ready for more operating mines starts with our kids and having them understand the important role that it plays in our economy and in our future.
It's tough going last. All the good
Yeah,
answers
I know.
are taken.
Yeah, exactly.
You thought it was hard going first, right?
Yeah, no, but just kind of building on that, and I think as an effect of that, and maybe as a precursor to that, in 10 years, I think it would be, and hopefully sooner, I think it would be a success if we have the kind of dialogue and trust and regulatory function just that comes with broader public buy-in and that understanding that yes, there are risks around mining, there are risks around any industry, but there are benefits here, and we have the best shot of success if we're working together and pushing towards those goals. And so, I think that would come out of a few successes in the Yukon, and I think that that could create a few successes in the Yukon as well. So.
That's great. We do have a handful of minutes here before you all are released for your drink session. Are there any questions in the audience? No. Yeah.
I think there's one there, Jamie, first.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Can I?
Yeah.
So the question I have for you guys, in your opinion, are current federal territorial regulatory framework adequate, or do they need reform to reflect modern indigenous industry relationship?
I had a little trouble understanding that. I'm sorry.
Was the question, do the frameworks require updates to factor in Indigenous viewpoints?
Yes.
Okay. So thanks for your question. I'll start since I'm speaking already. I'll figure out what to say as I go on. But look, I think every framework, any piece of legislation, it can all be improved. Certainly, the one we're living in, I think, is overdue for an update. I think everyone believes that. It's just a function of how do you build consensus. And I know it's a tricky piece of work, but I think a lot of good work has been done behind the scenes to do that. So I think it's the short answer is yes. I mean, I think everything can be improved. I think mining legislation in the Yukon is a priority for everybody. It's a priority for us as an industry. We just love to have clarity to understand what we're working towards, and we'd love to have a framework that serves First Nations better, so that they don't feel like they're again on the outside looking in, trying to vie for the things that matter to them.
Yeah, it absolutely, the regime and the framework needs to be updated. Right now, it isn't reflective of First Nations views or interests or approaches, and it does need to be updated to be reflective of that, and also flexible enough to account for the fact that each First Nation is individual. So certainly it does need to be updated.
Yeah, and just to add to that, I think that industry doesn't need to wait for the regulation to do things the right way, to have those conversations. And there are a lot of groups that are doing the right things, and there are a lot of productive conversations that are happening at those tables. So that's very encouraging to see.
That's a very good point, because it is happening on an ad hoc basis. And to give the government, territorial, federal credit as well, they are conducting consultation on projects, project specific with First Nations to varying degrees of effectiveness, I would say. So it is being done, and there's nothing, I mean, one of the beauties of an old framework that isn't adequate in a lot of ways is it gives you a lot of flexibility to make things up on an ad hoc basis that suits your project and the potentially affected First Nations and the relationship that you have. But for certainty, predictability, we do need a stronger framework to guide that.
We got another question here.
Yeah, I'm going to pull together a few different thoughts here that, you know, after Eagle and a history in the Yukon of challenging end results for mining projects, not just the First Nations, but I think a lot of the citizenship are struggling with trust for the industry more broadly. At the same time, Pierre Lassonde spoke this morning about the need for the Yukon as a jurisdiction to mature and grow up. And he spoke about the collaboration between the regulatory and oversight regime and industry as being a key component of that, and cited Australia as an example of a place where that's healthy, where they accept the fact that nobody goes to work to do a bad job and are trying to do the right thing as far as responsible mining goes, and then collectively they work together to make sure that their mines and projects are advancing in the right ways. Now that we have a new territorial government, we're starting to look past or learn the lesson. We've learned some lessons from Eagle, and people are starting to look forward here. What would you see as some of the practical steps, like rather than just the higher level? Oh, we need to grow up. Like, what does growing up look like day to day in the Yukon, and what are some first steps that companies can take to do that?
Well, I would have hoped, since he's a Snowline employee, that would have been a softball question, but...
Is he one of yours? All right. Okay, that's going to be an awkward conversation. Since it's a Snowline employee, I'll answer, unless...
I'd be conflicted.
Otherwise, it seems fixed. Look, I would say, I mean, it's at every level, but I mean, something Lauren said earlier resonated with me. I mean, we front-ended so much of the process and tried to kind of solve it with a bit of a CYA approach on the front end, but these are living things, and I think on enforcement and the back end, and not just everything at once up front, but walking with these mines throughout their whole life cycle is one place where we can put more energy. That's an area where First Nations also should be involved. I mean, I don't know how you get over that chasm of lack of trust other than involvement in the right ways. So yeah, it's the first time in my career. Pierre said it. He's had a longer career than I have, but it's the first time in my career where, at least federally, we're saying positive things about mining, and it's gone from why to, I would say, we're still in the why not phase. We're not quite in the how phase. But it's a marked improvement. So that's just my first knee-jerk response to your former employee's question.
I completely agree. I think that is a near-term and specific thing to work on is improving that oversight during project implementation. I also think for all of our sakes with respect to Eagle specifically, the findings of the independent review panel or board, those need to be integrated into guidance policy, whatever Yukon government is planning for that needs to happen very, very quickly. That is a part of starting to build back the trust of First Nations, the First Nation of Notcho-Nagdun specifically, and the general public.
I think if I can just add, one thing and I agree, like I think the regulatory side has a big role to play here, but since the question's on, what can be done on the industry side, I think part of it is an attitude shift as well in terms of relationships with regulators. And I know that, the mindset is out there, like, okay, CMI is coming to our site. Oh no, what do we do? But in starting out, you know, we almost started from a place of knowing so little that we knew that we were at a disadvantage, and so it was more like, okay, well, let's call CMI and see, get them out here and have them tell us what to do. What do they want to see? And I think, more broadly, that approach of not looking at the regulators as an adversary, but as another group of people who, want to see things done right, in this case in the Yukon, that shift in approach, I think, goes a long way to building collaborative relationships, and maybe it's a small step of hand-holding towards, ongoing monitoring, not just upfront, and building that trust that, we're going to be in this journey together, walking this journey together.
That's great. I have not kept my promise to get you out of here by 4:30. I know you had one question. Are you cool to talk about? Okay, we'll go for it.
I'll just ask one question. Going back to Lauren, your first comment about investors and how important they are to try and go in the journey together to effectively get a better industry, at least a better perception of the industry. Is it possible that we shouldn't be looking at ESG or sustainability as a single topic on its own, and instead investors look at it as a point of risk? If you look at Agnico as an operating mine, the Lundin family of companies, and other companies, B2 Gold or others, they don't really talk about this as a single topic. They see it more as embedded within sustainability as a means to be able to lower risk, have a better performance over time, better collaboration, and just ultimately, kind of embed it within strategy. And ultimately, that leads to better predictability for investors, which is what they're looking for.
I think that's an excellent approach, and I can already imagine the shift in questions from, how is your relationship with the Indigenous groups, to tell me about your risk profile with respect to this nation, this nation, this nation, and particularly, doing the research on this topic and this topic, and what specifically are you doing to mitigate those risks? Absolutely, that's an excellent reframing that will make the conversation sophisticated and then well-informed.
And it's the right question too, because people want to invest in good businesses, and good businesses don't just mean, good project or good product or, good widget, whatever it might be. It also means, good management teams and good cultures, and de-risking every aspect of the business, including, all of your relationships, anyone that affects, what you're trying to achieve. So it's always been what people are trying to get to the heart of. It's just we're trying different pathways to figure it out, sometimes succeeding, sometimes not. But it's always what people are trying to get to the heart of is what is the risk in your business, and those are very fair questions to ask.
That's great. Well, I appreciate everyone sticking with this to the end, because lots of important topics were covered, and I think a lot of great viewpoints were shared. I think to the Pierre's earlier conversation, it's such an exciting time for the Yukon, and I think everyone here is passionate about advancing things in the right way, and exciting to hear some thoughts on that. So I'll pass it back to Jonas and let him wrap up for the day.